What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Providence Perspective. I'm Jay, the Reformed Puerto Rican dude. Thank you very much for joining me in this video tonight. And I have with me a good friend of mine. You may have seen him a couple of times. This is Elias. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? Glad to be here, man.
Good to have you. So, Elias, you've been busy, man. You have just had your first baby. Well, not you,
Yes.
your wife did.
Right.
And but I have to share something with the audience because you were telling me that you got plenty of time off from work to spend time with
hmm
your baby, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna lie, man. No excuses. You got to bring me your best tonight because you should be well rested,
Yep.
not working
Oh
currently.
man. Yeah. Well, rested a little bit. Yeah. With the baby, keeps you up at night. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know anything about that, man. My babies were angels. They never did anything wrong. They never bothered us. They just slept through the night from day
Wow.
one. I'm kidding, bro. I'm kidding. No, man.
Yep.
It's hard to have a firstborn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
When you're new to everything, and you're like,
yep,
because it's not only the fact that okay, he's keeping you up at night. It's like when you're new, it's your first. It's like you're constantly worried. Is he okay? Okay,
yep.
what's the crying this time? I just fed him. Is what's going on? So you're like, it's very stressful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. The first, for me at least, I think the first is the hardest. So it'll get easier, man. Hang in there. And I appreciate you taking the time to join me and talk about what we were going to talk about, which is Anglicanism, right? I think
Yes.
that there is a lot of maybe ignorance, we could say, or
Yeah.
naivety or
Misunderstandings.
misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Um, and just straight up, just like, kind of knowing that Anglicanism exists in the
hmm
Protestant world, but not really knowing what it is that
hmm
Anglicans believe.
Right.
And so we're going to get into all that. Before I do, like I said, you've been on my channel before, but I'm going to give you like a brief 2 minute, 1 minute, however long you need to just introduce yourself and, say what you do. I already said your name. So, tell us more about yourself.
Yeah. So obviously, I have a YouTube channel, a small YouTube channel called Reformed Berean. And kind of been doing that for a little bit over a year now, like year and some change. And just for people to know, I actually been on Jay's channel before, but I grew up Pentecostal, and then all my life I was born into the Pentecostal church, and uh, basically 2020 hit, became reformed, and then basically couple what and last year in 2024, I would say beginning of 2024, sort of middle way. I wanted to kind of really be sure, hey, why as Reformed Baptists we hold to what we hold to in terms of covenantal aspects, and why are we different from Paedo Baptists? And so, I went to my wife. Long story short, we basically studied the covenants, and we got convinced of Paedo baptism. And obviously, so me being obviously more, I've always said when I was a Reformed Baptist, if I ever, because there was always, there was always that joke, oh, Reformed Baptist, when's this one gonna go Paedo Baptist, and all that. Even though I was very sure, like I was so sure, I was the one that used to say, oh man, Reformed Baptist, I go Paedo Baptist, like Jared Longshore, he's the one known famous one. He's like, oh, he's backpedaling the Reformation. What is he doing and all that? So I was that. Um, and so, but I always said, if I ever go there, if I ever go to Peter Baptist, I would really look into Anglicanism, because I really much appreciated the beauty and the history, and um the obviously one the liturgy, obviously, as well. And so, I looked into more of that, and but yeah, long story short, became Paedo Baptist, and my wife are now Anglicans. And so, yeah, so now my channel is basically me talking about Anglicanism, and obviously having other brothers and sisters in Christ on the channel. Obviously, this I still have Reformed Baptists sometimes come on the channel, Presbyterians, obviously still part of the laborers. So yeah, sorry if I
Yeah.
went on a little thing there.
No, you're good, man. That's good. I mean, it's not good that you went Anglican. Breaks my heart. But what are you gonna do?
Mhm.
Um, Speak the truth in love, and iron sharpening iron until you become
Amen.
Reformed Baptist again. No,
Hey,
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was gonna say, like, quoting Rob from our group, laborers group. Iron can't sharpen iron unless you see sparks fly. So hey.
That's true, but it's hard to make sparks fly with you, man, because it's pretty easy to get along with you. Like even if you disagree, it's like the most peaceful warfare I've ever seen. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, do you mind if I just hit you with this sword here real quick? Just lower your shield because I can't quite get a good hit on you. So, oh yeah, no problem, man. Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
that's how it feels like with you, man. You make it
Well,
hard. You make it hard to be passionate and yell at you. You know what I'm saying? Like you just make it hard.
I guess you could say it wasn't always like that. Like I wasn't very I guess you can say calm in terms of when someone disagrees with me. Like I said, like in 2020, and I would say my first cage stage year. I wouldn't even need a year.
Oh, the cage stage.
Cage stage when I was a Calvinist. Basically, I was technically
Wait,
Pentecostal still.
are you not a Calvinist anymore?
No. I'm talking about like before, like when I was a
Oh,
Pentecostal.
like just
Pentecostal, sorry.
Calvinist. Okay,
Yeah,
I get it. I
I'm
get
getting
it.
my tongue twisted here. So when I was still in the Pentecostal church, slowly, because as soon as I got married in 2021, right when I got back from our honeymoon, literally the day of we got back from our honeymoon, me and my wife started looking for churches, a church to go to, because we were like, hey, we can't stay in a Pentecostal church. We have different doctrinal differences and all that stuff. Anyway, but I basically when I was still Pentecostal officially, I guess you can say. I was having those cage stage moments, and yeah, I would like with family members and people. I would say one or two from the church. I would get into debates with, and I even said this on my channel where me and my brother-in-law would really go head to head sometimes. Sometimes not, but it was like I think maybe one time we just got head to head, but like little drips and drabs of like little. Hey, this debate went a little went too far, but anyway. But no, I have definitely grown, and obviously me and my brother in law are definitely reconciled, obviously. But yeah, and so basically, picture a complementarian Calvinist in a Pentecostal egalitarian environment, cage stage.
Oh,
That's gonna be sparks fly. You're gonna see everything going on,
that's
you
yeah,
know.
that's
Yeah,
beautiful to see, man.
but
I would
obviously,
have loved
by
to
the
have
grace of
seen that.
God, God. Oh, you love to see that.
I would love to see that. I still
it
got a
was
little bit of the cage stage in me, man.
it was definitely what's the word? I wouldn't say not hard, but it was definitely an exciting time, I would say. But by the grace of God, the Lord has definitely humbled me. Um, Definitely I have learned to dialogue with people. Obviously, experience comes with that as well. God's providence. Dialoguing more with my brother-in-law. After we had one big thing. We now we're able to sit down, have a cup after dinner coffee, and whatever, and just relax, open the Bible, and just talk about anything. And so yeah,
That's how you do it, man.
yeah,
That's how it should be done.
amen.
All right, bro. Well, let's get right into it. I think we're ready to rock and roll here. So, let's me start with the first question that I wanted to ask you, which is, you know, I know this is like a very open-ended question. So, I don't expect you to like hit every detail, but just generally speaking, what is Anglicanism and how does it distinguish itself? How is it different from other Protestant traditions?
Okay, yeah, I would say Anglicanism, is essentially, and I'm stealing this quote because I actually love this quote as I was studying Anglicanism and slowly going into that Anglicanism at the time. So it's not my quote. Basically, Anglicanism at its best would be what Rome would look like if it adhered to the Reformation. It's basically Reformed Catholicism. That's what basically Anglicanism is, Reformed Catholicism. And what I mean by that is, when because obviously Anglicanism, we definitely hold to what is called apostolic succession. I think that's part of the question is what distinguishes itself from other Protestant groups is, we definitely hold to Protestant apostolic succession. We're really I guess you can say it's in terms of if I can use this word pride in a sense, we believe, we have apostolic succession, all the way to the apostles, in doctrine and on through the laying on of hands. It has to be both. Obviously, if you don't have the right doctrine, you don't have the gospel. What's the point? Um, and so obviously, but yeah, no, we definitely hold to that. So when the Protestant Reformation was happening, and then obviously, um, you had Protestant, I guess you can say, groups. 'Cause I always like to think of Protestantism as an umbrella. So you had Lutherans, and then you had Anglicans, and then you had Presbyterians forming. Then you had Baptists, Reformed, particular Baptists. And so what really distinguishes us is that we definitely love our historical roots. We definitely appreciate um the what has gone before us, and so we hold on to that. We hold on to that dearly. And so yeah, but basically this is what you see in basically what's commonly known as high church. You see people wearing vestments, the robes, and the liturgy, where you see people kind of very formally, and then you see people with the cross in the front, and you see bowing, you see yeah, bowing. You see procession, in an Anglican liturgy. I'm trying to think what else. Top of my head. Basically, this is everything you see in an Anglican liturgy in a high church setting. That's basically what distinguishes itself from Protestant groups. So yeah, basically, Anglicanism is a reformed Catholicism, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would all Anglicans consider themselves Protestant? Or let me actually ask you this.
Hmm.
It's really a twofold question, right? Like,
Right.
would Anglicans consider themselves Protestant? And do you think that Anglicanism qualifies as a Protestant movement?
Mm. Okay. So I would say yes, it definitely does. Because I was going to answer if every Anglican considers a Protestant. Well, I can't speak for every single Anglican because obviously, if I can say this, Lutheranism is Lutherans and Anglicans, we can get along pretty very well. They also have liturgies in high church liturgy, and we can get along. There's even some Lutherans that don't like to call themselves Protestant, and I understand why. Same things for Anglicans. It's because and I think it kind of goes into more of a modern evangelical mindset where the word Catholic is bad, and you know this, Jay. Where obviously me and you agree. Hey, we're not afraid to use the word Catholic. It just simply means universal. We're part of
Mhm.
the Catholic Church, universal church as a whole, and so but obviously you get into modern evangelicalism, and you get oh, we're not Catholic, we're Protestant, and this is what we mean by that. And so you get a lot of Anglicans, and that well, I'm not that, I'm Catholic. Yes, we affirm these essentials here, and so, but if that's what basically is Protestant, I'm identifying as Catholic. And so, but I would say essentially, if you were to basically Anglicanism, yes, Anglicanism is Protestant because it is basically I would say protest it protested Rome. It went it is reformed, right? Has reformed, and has joined in a sense the Reformation, right? The Protestant Reformation. And so in the reason why obviously in Reformation, when speaking of Reformation, when you're speaking of Anglicanism, they often call it the English Reformation, because what goes on in England is really, I would say, more particular than what goes on in Geneva or in Germany
Like the
with Luther,
continent.
right? The Continental Reform, or even in German with Luther, right? So, like, England had its own Reformation. So yes, I would say yes. Anglicanism, it's Protestant, but what do we mean by that? Obviously, uh, the 39 articles obviously, if you read that, it is I would say a Protestant, right? It is protesting, and he even says, "Hey, we do not hold to such and such doctrines of what Rome does. We do not hold the Roman doctrines, right? You know, so that it's has that Protestant distinctive there." But like I said, we as Anglicans don't see us starting at the Protestant Reformation with either with Luther or even with some people like to kind of what about King Henry? Didn't he start your Anglican church? Well, no, we still believe we always had the church in England, but yeah, not every single. I can't speak for every single Anglican, but I would say majority of Anglicans would be fine with the historical term Protestant. They probably wouldn't, like I said, say that in a more modern context. They would just say I'm just a Catholic or Reformed Catholic.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe if I can summarize, like you would say that some Anglicans might be a little bit allergic to like the low church kind of
right,
thing that the word Protestant has become associated with, like
hmm
maybe low church Baptist or quote unquote non-denominational or
right,
that kind of thing, and the fear of saying the word Catholic as in universal, and so they're like, oh, if that's what you mean with Protestant, no, I'm not that, right?
right.
I'm Catholic as in a part of the Church Universal.
Mhm.
But you're saying, but Anglicanism is historically Protestant because it is protesting against Rome's, I guess you could say, deformation. So,
Yeah. So, and let me kind of little explain what we mean by that. So basically, Anglicans, like for me, I'm Reformed Anglican. I consider myself Reformed Catholic, and so, but with for us, obviously, we have a Episcopal form of government, bishops, right? We believe
mhm,
bishops, priests. People who don't know, priest is just literally the English translation of the word presbyter. Bishop, presbyter, deacon, right? Those are threefold office. So the Bishop of Rome, which is now modernly called the Pope, we still believe yes, that is a real office that the Bishop of Rome is an office, and we recognize that, but obviously, um, the Bishop of Rome has taken his office and basically gone too far with his authority, right? Similar to what happened in this Great Schism in the year 1000, I think 1020,
1054
1054
between
AD.
between the East
The
and
West,
Rome.
what
Yeah, I gotcha.
the papacy wasn't the main cause of it, but obviously that was obviously a big part of it. Hey, the Bishop of Rome is taking his authority too much on, and who does he think he is? And I'm simplifying history, people.
No
Forgive me.
worries. No worries. You
And
take your time,
so
man.
yeah, so obviously we reject papal supremacy, papal infallibility, right? We reject those things. We protest that, right? So yeah, that's basically one distinctive of
Okay.
Anglicanism. Yeah.
That's a really important distinctive, I think, because a lot of people, depending on the type of Anglican that you're dealing with, if you really don't know Anglicanism, you might think, well, what's the difference between this and Roman Catholicism, right? Like they seem like to be pretty much the same thing. And in some ways, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in some ways, it seems to me that Anglicans do want to claim a Catholicity, um, in the sense that they would say they are just as legitimate as Rome. But here's the funny thing, and again, I've found that there's a uh, s- uh, varied opinions on this matter.
Mhm.
I have heard some Anglicans say um, Rome is apostate, but they are still brethren in a sense. There are some that would say no, they are brethren who are confused. I mean,
Right. Right.
I've heard such a, and this is, I think this is for the people that maybe have looked into Anglicanism. They're like, yeah, I don't get it. There seems to be a lot of different positions in within Anglicanism, right? So you've
Mhm.
got, even if we're not talking about Rome, you've got sort of like these semi denominations within Anglicanism. And I say semi denominations because I don't know other what and what to call it, right? Um, So I want to start defining these things, or at least
Mhm.
talking about them and kind of
Yeah.
explaining their distinctives, right? So you've mentioned what is, you've mentioned Reformed Anglican,
Mhm.
um, but there are other varieties of that sort of like,
Right.
semi-denominations within Anglicanism. So
Mhm.
let's start with that, with Reformed Anglican. What is a Reformed Anglican?
Okay. Yeah. So basically, a Reformed Anglican it is basically someone who is reformed in terms of, I would say, soteriology, right? We have a reformed soteriology. In other words, Calvinistic soteriology. I have met actually in some Reformed Anglicans that are 4-point Calvinists, and they're proud of it, and they're happy with where they are. And
You said
so
4 point.
4-point Calvin, yeah,
Oh, so
4
there
point.
there are, what is
Amar
it called?
Amaron. I can never say that
Amiraldist.
word. Oh,
Yeah, I
sorry.
can
I
I
can
can't
never
say
say
the
that word. Yeah, so
Amiraldist is because of, I forget this guy's name, even though his last name is, anyway.
yeah.
Yes,
Or
4 point
or if
Calvinist, Amiraldist. Yeah.
right, or if they don't, and they'll say the atonement with they won't deny limited atonement, but they won't kind of not won't deny it, but won't accept it at the same time, kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's kind of mystery
Sure.
there. So anyway, so yeah, basically that's a reform Anglicanism, and also we basically, like I said, we consider ourselves Reformed Catholic, right? Right? We appreciate what has gone before, and we like I said, we don't see ourselves starting with Reformation, but we see ourselves still continuing it with it, and also Reformed Anglicanism, in a sense, distinctives with, we do share very similarities with Presbyterians in terms of views of the covenants, right? Views of the covenants, right? Might explain it in different ways in certain parts, but definitely very similar in that way. Um, but yeah, in basically, there's also a expression with Reformed Anglicans, because, like I said, there is, because this is where I also want to explain, and I said this in private chat. There is kind of a growing movement now within, I guess you can say, today's world, where there is a lot of people claiming to be Reformed Anglican, but they're very, if I can use the word, low church, but also really essentially just denying that, and kind of, we there's something there was not really nothing before the Reformation, basically kind of giving into the idea of, we began with King Henry and the Reformation, and basically that's where we started.
Okay.
um and
So they would say like, they would say they wouldn't necessarily hold to like apostolic succession and stuff like that.
if they do, it might be just lip service, but they would really downplay it. They would
Okay.
really, right. And so and this is just, this is what we as Anglicans say, they're Presbyterians with a prayer book.
Okay.
That's like a little thing within Anglicanism. I never heard of that until I joined. And so, but anyway,
What a quick question about those guys.
yep.
If I walked into their church, would I
Mhm.
think it's a non-denominational church?
It's it depends.
Because
Yes, some of
the
them, look really non-denom, or even, like I said, some might, is this Presbyterian church or Baptist church? Yeah,
Yeah, because the way you're describing it, I'm almost picturing like, I don't know, drum set, guitars, pastor shows up in a plaid shirt and jeans.
yeah. There
Uh,
is that, and if I can,
Interesting.
kind of give a little plug here. And my channel, I had the other Paul, which is he's an Anglican, and he lives in Australia, and he's saying that that's very heavily within Australia, where a lot of Anglicans not really identifying historically what is an Anglican, and they're really low church, non-denom, like you said, drum set, guitar, and all that. Yeah, so I'm not speaking of just America, but also around the world. That's happening. But yeah, so a lot of it right now is basically Reformed Anglican. That word is being kind of used for that. So
Mhm.
not really necessarily as what I explain myself. Like I said, me as reform. I also didn't take this term. I didn't coin this term. Reformed high churchman. That's basically also what I call myself as well, because
Reformed high
high
churchman.
high churchman, high churchmen.
Gotcha.
Basically,
Gotcha.
because reform again, there were people that are claiming to reform Anglicanism. They're not really into vestments or into really following the prayer book for their worship service on Sunday, right? Because the prayer book has liturgy and how to do worship.
Hmm.
And some Reformed Anglicans don't want to, don't, if they do, is maybe some Sundays or maybe some little part of the service that they'll follow the prayer book, then they'll go back to whatever they're doing. um so yeah, for me, it's the prayer book. Let's say what this, let's do what the prayer book is uh has for worship, right? Let's not go into something that's let's do how we feel. No, let's do, if we're Anglican, let's be Anglicans. We're not non-denominational. And so
Right.
basically that's what is going taking the name Reformed Anglican today. Like I said, but for me, I'm Reformed Anglican, right? Calvinistic and soteriology. You know, uh, me and the Presbyterian would share the same view of the covenants, right? But obviously me, I, my the church I go to, right? They have vestments, right? People, the robes, and and they have an altar in the front. They do processions. They carry a cross. I'm fine with images, and icons and stuff like that. Obviously, obviously don't venerate or anything like that. But yeah, so that's for me. I'm from Anglican, but I hold to all these things, right? High church, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, that brings me to another. I've actually got two questions. So
Yeah.
uh, first, I'll say this much. It sounds like there's like a more traditional Anglican and the Reformed Anglican
Hmm.
area
Yeah.
umbrella. We'll say umbrella. The Reformed
Right.
Anglican umbrella, there's more of an old school, traditional, let's follow
Right.
the Book of Common Prayer, let's follow our liturgy,
Right.
let's dress the way we always dress, that kind of thing. And then there's another sort of Reformed Anglicanism that is being, would you say that's more being influenced by other denominations outside of Anglicanism? Is that what maybe it's going on?
It could be. They're also going a little bit more non-denominational route. Like I said, like the from what I heard stories from the other Paul, an Anglican brother, he's heard people almost in terms of like basically dropping the name Anglican and just being and just not wanting to associate whatever that comes with.
So
Basically,
how
wanting to
do
be non-denominational in a sense. Yeah.
but if you have an Episcopal polity, um, doesn't that kind of rise through the ranks, right? Like how does the church deal with that?
Right. Yeah. And that's one thing too. Like even me when I was a Reformed Baptist, if we I was a 1689. Obviously, you are currently a 1689
Hmm.
Reformed Baptist. You know, you, if someone's you know in a 1689 Reformed Baptist church, they have that title, but yet they're wanting to oh, let's kind of deviate from the confession, and I'm not really a Sabbatarian. I don't even hold to limited atonement. I don't hold to what's it what's another 1689 distinctive
Regular principle of worship,
right. And
Sabbatarian, yeah, those kinds of things. Yeah.
so basically a lot of things that come with the 1689, and you're like, okay, we're 1689 Reformed Baptists. You're in a 1689 Reformed Baptist church. You congregate there. You claim the title, but yet you're also giving lip service to all these other things that are like basically going in a more non-denominational route. What what's up with that? You know what I mean? And so you would probably ask, why be a 1689? Why claim to be a 1689 Reformed Baptist, or why go to a 1689 Reformed Baptist church if you want to do
Right.
these other things? You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does the church? I guess the church is being, because I know that Anglicans tend to be ecumenical. right? To some extent. Uh,
Yeah, to some extent, like I said, like where like I said, we recognize the Bishop of Rome, his office. Obviously, like I said, we believe he's taken on, I guess you can say, too much. Yeah, he's overstepped his bounds with authority. Like I
sure.
said, we don't hold to papal supremacy and papal infallibility and all that stuff. So we
But well, I guess what I'm trying to ask, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
yeah.
Um, when it comes to these churches that are Anglican in name,
Hmm.
um, but are acting as though they are sort of a non-denominational church,
Right.
does the church, the Anglican church, well, we can talk about how there's not a centralized Anglican church anymore, but rather different branches, right? Like you've got,
Hmm.
well, not branches. I don't know what to call it.
So you're saying like
Organizations.
more like organizations in a sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you've got the Free Church of England, right? Then you've got the Church of England. Then you've got the Anglicans
ACNA.
over in, right? Exactly. So there's these like different organizations, but
Yeah.
uh, let's put that aside for a second. If a church, an Anglican church, regardless of what organization it's closely affiliated
Mhm.
with, starts to become more like you're saying, non-denominational, and they start abandoning the Book of Common Prayer and the
Mhm.
39 articles and stuff like that. It's an Episcopal system,
Mhm.
right? So a bishop is going to hear about it, and then somebody above him is going to hear about it.
Yeah.
Um, do they just kind of say, well, it's up to them how they want to do it, or do they
Yeah,
ever?
yeah, like I said, like in certain, like I said, that's where like you got guys like the other Paul. In fact, I think he made a whole video on his channel, kind of pleading to the Anglican churches, and I think maybe to his organization. Forgive me if Paul, you ever watch this, forgive me if I get this wrong or whatever. But he's actually made a plea into saying, hey, the Anglican churches that are basically in name only, and you do you want to, but here's what our tradition has. We have the Book of Common Prayer and all
Okay,
that. He's giving them a plea. Hey, there's beauty here. That if you're claiming Anglican, this is why we're Anglican, and
okay.
basically pleading with them in a sense, like, hey, what if you're Anglican, you're part of our in whatever denomination organizations you have.
So it doesn't
Why try to
sound.
be other?
It sounds like he's trying to get back to that foundation, but
Mhm. So
correct me if
if
I'm
you're saying like
wrong.
more like hierarchy, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if it seems like it's there is and this is why you have other continuing Anglican groups and organizations where they would feel like, hey, the hierarchy, or the bishops aren't really saying anything, and this is
I gotcha. Okay.
allowed, and and then that's one thing where like I'll probably get into this, where like some of the more non-denom ish type Anglican um would say, oh, that there's a charismatic Anglican,
That's interesting.
there's the evangelical Anglican, there's an Anglican for you kind of thing.
I gotcha.
And I
Okay.
was like, where we as traditional Anglicans were like, no, that essentially there's really only two types of Anglicans, and there's a spectrum within this. Reformed Anglican, as I said, as I kind of explained a little bit there, also in a more Anglo-Catholic Anglican, and we'll probably get into
Okay.
that more later. But
Yes.
there's a spectrum even between that, and
So
so.
I definitely want to talk about the Anglo-Catholic thing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. But I before we do that, I just wanted to clarify one thing. You had mentioned like 5 minutes ago,
Mhm.
or maybe 10 minutes ago. I don't know. Something about images, right? You mentioned that like yes, you have like
Yep.
images as part of your not worship because you don't worship images,
Right.
but as part of uh, like we could say it's decorative, right? Like
Mhm.
what do you do with images? Like is it the same thing that Lutherans do? How is it different from Lutheranism? How is it different from Rome even? Like
Mhm.
can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I would say us us Anglicans and with Lutherans, we share, if not very similar, if not the same stance and view on images. It's definitely a didactic tool. In best, we do have it in we have images in our sanctuary. it's a didactic tool, right? It teaches, we believe it teaches something, right? You ever heard the saying, a picture of 1,000 words, it tells you something.
Okay.
But also too, it what's the word? If I can, I'm trying to have my wording here. It when you're in worship and you're seeing these images, it also brings a reminder to you of something, and it points you to something. Where in a sense, like, so if like I said, Anglican church or Lutheran church, like I said, we're very similar. And you see a lot of images of saints, of angels, and obviously you're gonna see Jesus somewhere, and stuff like that. But it reminds you, hey, we are part of a Catholic church. We are part of the saints that have gone before us. The saints that are in heaven. We are worshiping God together, and so when we're worshiping, there's this reverence, like, hey, I'm. It's not just hear me now, but it's also the saints that have gone before me, the saints that are in heaven, right? And so it points you to that, and it points you to Christ, and it gives more of this awe and reverence to when you worship. And same thing with, like I said, even with the angels, right? Because even when you look in the book of Revelation, when John is seeing worship in heaven, he's seeing angels worshiping God, right? You see angels are bowing down, or covering their faces, and so like that. So it points you to something. Not only does it teach you as well, because there's also, if I can just break down one simple image, we as Anglicans and Lutherans, we're fine with a picture of Mary and the baby Jesus, right? And sometimes it can be more of an icon, where the Eastern style Byzantine, I think it's probably known as a Byzantine style artwork of Mary and Jesus as a baby, or a child. But it actually has meaning. So you, even down to the color. So whereas Mary is wearing red, and that symbolizes her virginity, right? It's and she, because Mary was a virgin when she gave birth to Christ, right? And also, Jesus, when you see a picture of Mary and the baby Jesus in a Byzantine, more icon Eastern style picture, he's more looking like a little man, in a sense, more not necessarily a baby. Is because that's actually pointing to more also his divine nature. He's fully man, born of a virgin, but he's also fully divine, right? He's fully God, fully man. So
Okay.
that's what that's pointing to. And so you get that. That's what that image is teaching. And so us Lutherans and Anglicans, we that's what we view as, for pictures. And essentially, when it comes to venerating them, right? People say, "Oh, do you venerate them? Do you kiss them and bow down to them like the Eastern Orthodox do, or Roman Catholics do with their statues and pictures as well?" Um, Obviously, we would disagree with that, us Lutherans and the Anglicans, because we would say, "Hey, yes, everything I explained, but yet we don't venerate them, because um that we're not called to do that. God, uh that's an act we reserve for God alone."
Okay.
And so, yeah. And just to kind of clarify, there are some Anglo Catholics that are okay with, in the terms of just like maybe kissing images, and bowing down to, like say, in term, maybe a form of prayer. We can get into that. um and there's even Anglo Catholics that are more the spectrum, whereas, what do we mean by veneration? Because simply having an image in your church, and it isn't in terms of venerating, in terms of honoring something about it. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Mhm. All right. I mean, yeah, I think we need to clarify what is an Anglo Catholic. So, like, it,
Yeah.
is that the same thing, right? I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but there are some people going around that are causing some confusion for some people. They're just saying,
Mhm.
are Anglo Catholics old Catholics? Are
Mhm.
they Roman Catholic lights, but they just don't submit to the Pope? Like, what's going on here,
Yeah.
right? Like, so clarify that a little bit for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and like, eh, I would say Anglo Catholicism is Anglo Catholics is people who are Anglican, right? That they would submit to the eight. I mean, 39 articles. They would submit to that, right? Because that is basically, in a sense, their confession of faith. Um, but they hold to a more of an in terms of more, I guess you can say, pro Roman teachings, where some Anglo Catholics would probably have no issue with, in terms of praying to saints, right? Or ask, or some would clarify, oh, we don't pray, we ask them for prayer. Some Anglo Catholics are fine with that, and also some like I mentioned before, some Anglo Catholics are fine with, in terms of venerating images, and some, yeah, and also too, it's more of that spectrum where Anglo Catholics would, to an eye of other Protestant denominations, more leaning towards more Roman doctrines, like I mentioned, and also too, where they would be more, what's the word? Um,
Less Calvinistic, maybe.
yes, definitely less Calvinistic, and if it's more on the, if you're more on the really Anglo Catholic spectrum, you're really not Calvinist.
Okay.
But yeah, and in terms of Old Catholic, so so us as Anglicans, we recognize other orders, right? So if in fact, actually, if let's say in Eastern Orthodox, like there's some couple well known former Eastern Orthodox priests that became Protestant, right? Either joined Lutherans or Anglicans or even some Presbyterian. Um, we would actually see their orders as valid. So if a priest, let's just say an example, an Orthodox priest became convinced and convicted to become, let's say, an Anglican, right? He wants to become an Anglican because he believes, hey, this is true, and he affirms the gospel and wants to leave Eastern Orthodoxy. And he's like, hey, he becomes an Anglican, and he wants to be a Anglican priest, presbyter. Some Anglican, if not most or all, churches would actually recognize his orders from the Eastern Orthodox, basically validations, right? Eastern Orthodoxy, because like I said, we hold to what's called apostolic succession, and some Anglicans, if not a lot of them, hold to what's called branch theory, where there's within the one true church, there's branches, right? You have, again, we believe we're starting from the apostles, right? Christ, the apostles, and then the early church. But obviously, you have the Great Schism. You have the East and the West. We believe we're a branch. Anglicans, we believe we're a branch from the Western Church. We're part of the Western Church. We are not the Western Church. We're part of the Western Church. And so we recognize Eastern Orthodox orders, we recognize Roman Catholic orders, and Old Catholics. So Old Catholic is actually a break off. It's a break off from Rome. It's actually in a sense protesting Rome, because Old
Yeah,
Catholics don't
it
believe
is.
in papal supremacy or infallibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when Vatican I came out, they broke off, and so they actually reject that. So they actually reject what would make a Roman Catholic today. They would reject, um, and so Old Catholics, they would be kind of be in their own group. They not Anglican, but you can be ordained as a Old Catholic in the Old Catholic Church, but be also accepted into the Anglican Church. Right? There's obviously well known
Mhm.
people. I'm not gonna get into that, but there's obviously people that have done that. And so, yeah, Old Catholic isn't Anglo Catholic. Old Catholic is its own thing. Like I said, they're
Right.
they're a church that separated from Rome after either during or after Vatican I. Like I said, they reject papal supremacy and infallibility. But yeah, Anglo Catholics, they're more on the side of non-Calvinistic, more leaning towards prayers to saints. And there's a spectrum. Like I said, there's definitely a spectrum there. And venerating icons and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. So, I'll say this about the old Catholics. It's funny to me, man, because they will say that, and I'm not here to debate or anything,
Hmm.
but especially since there's no old Catholic in front of me. But I just
Right.
think it's so interesting. They say, well, the Protestant Reformation was not valid, right? They would agree with Rome on like 99.9% of everything, but just everything after Vatican I is just a mistake. you
Hmm.
know, so it almost excuse me, they almost think like a Protestant in some ways,
Hmm.
but they just don't want to be called Protestant, and they don't want to join the Protestants. So, generally speaking,
Yeah.
so I just think that's fascinating. But
Yeah, they definitely have a non-schismatic viewpoint in terms of like because and a lot of them why they might say the Reformation was bad and stuff like that is because what came out of it. You know, there was a lot of sects that came out, sects of terms of Christian.
yeah,
um
sects,
yes.
sects, different
You
groups.
know, and so, you know, like I said, like they're very, they really really, even myself, like, I don't want to see, different too many branches. You know, like it kind of, I've heard this terminology, whereas it's a mirror, whereas when you break a mirror you have 1,000 little pieces. Wouldn't it be beautiful to have less of it and more as a more of a mirror? And so, whereas Anglo Catholics, when they say the Reformation was bad, because it basically they had a mirror and they burst into all these little glasses here, and now there's people that can start, like some people that can start a church, and it's okay. And there's even Reformed Baptists that even don't want that, right? And you probably seen, know some of yourself, Jay. Reformed Baptists that say no, you can't just say I want to be a pastor and just leave your church and start your whole new church. You know,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can't
but
just do that.
that's actually contrary to the confession, the
Right,
1689 confession. You can't
right,
just
and
up and go start a church and make yourself pastor.
right, and so
Um, but
a
anyway,
lot of Anglo Catholics and you know, I guess you can say old Catholics, since we're kind of bringing them up, they would see the Reformation as doing that, in a sense. If I can, and so that would say that that would be one of the main reasons where Reformation, and a lot of them even will blame Luther. Luther basically did this, and some of them might even give credit to Luther. Luther didn't want this, but it eventually came to that, and he started naming his own bishops and priests and stuff like that. So yeah.
yeah, sure. All right. Well, listen, I have just one more question, um,
Mhm.
because again, trying to sort of figure out like all these um, Anglican sub denominations, semi denominations,
Yeah.
Methodism, right?
Mhm.
Methodism is, well, you might disagree with this. I would say Baptist came out of Anglicanism through the nonconformists. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely.
um,
But especially even particular Baptists, I think you guys are a. I've heard the term children or stepchildren or a byproduct of the Church of England, right? You guys
okay,
definitely came out. Yeah, for the record, and like I said, I know many good brothers that are cool with this guy. I guess he definitely is a good person, brother, definitely brother in the Lord. But Dean Zoomer, he always points Baptists as coming out of from an Anabaptist radical movement, whereas,
right.
well, I would say no. I would say particular Baptists, Reformed Baptists can trace their history back to the Church of England. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, man, because if you really sit down and look at Anabaptist distinctives, I mean, yes, yes, Baptists and Anabaptists are Credo Baptists,
Mhm.
and yes, Baptists got uh, the idea of Credo baptism from the Anabaptists. But if you really sit down and look at what else they have in common, that's it. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like uh, the doctrinal distinctives of the Anabaptists are not overlapping with the doctrinal distinctives of the Baptists. If you look at the
Mhm.
Baptists, they're actually more similar to Congregationalists,
Mhm.
who are essentially pedo-Baptist Baptists, if you think about it.
Right.
And those did come straight out of the Church of England, but so did the Baptists, and that would make
Mhm.
so I appreciate that,
Yeah.
because that is, I think, a disingenuous argument against Baptists.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. What I wanted to ask you is about Methodism,
Mhm.
because Methodists, right? Like when you look at Methodists, at at first,
Mhm.
you look at their church polity and their practices and stuff like that. You say, well, why aren't they considered Anglicans? Right? I mean, they did come out of the Church of England,
Mhm.
and they do a lot of the same things as Anglicans. So what is the distinction there? Do you know?
It's I'll admit I'm a little ignorant in terms of Methodist history, but I do know the basics of it. Whereas, obviously, um, the name is slipping from me. Oh, Wesley, John Wesley.
Yeah,
He would say that he was basically the father of the Methodist movement. But obviously, I believe he died an Anglican, right? He was an Anglican. But obviously, the people that became after him, right? His basically, in a sense, followers. Because and I don't mean that in a disingenuous term. I believe obviously there are Methodist brothers and sisters in Christ.
sure.
Um, but so Methodist, obviously, the Methodist movement started with Anglicans, but then obviously they wanted, looking at the history, they wanted to be its own thing. From and basically dropped Anglican and eventually became its own denomination within Protestantism, and yeah, basically lost its Anglican distinctive. But obviously, you can find probably a lot of similarities with Methodist and Anglican. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I haven't looked into it too much, but
Mhm,
at least at face value, I'm like, I don't know if there's a whole lot. I mean, their polity is Episcopal.
mhm.
Um, you know,
They baptize babies.
they baptize babies. They're pedo
Yeah,
Baptists.
yeah,
Excuse me. They well, maybe they don't focus so much on images like iconography and stuff like that as much as Anglicans. I would say they almost sometimes give me a bit more of a low church impression.
yeah.
But
I
it
would say,
depends.
especially more in the more modern context. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
they definitely, like I said, them coming from Anglicans, uh, they definitely have dropped the apostolic succession. Like I said,
That's true. Yeah.
yeah,
I don't see so much of
which is
that.
obviously an Anglican
Okay.
distinctive.
Right. Yeah. So maybe that's what it is, right? Like they kind of drop the high church sort of tradition
Mhm.
and the apostolic succession uh, as a matter of importance, right? Like
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And for any,
Um,
for just to clarify, and I don't know if I clarified this, where I think even I would say particular Baptists and Presbyterians, they would claim apostolic succession, but they would say it's apostolic succession in terms of teaching the gospel, the doctrine,
Correct.
in the teaching of the word. Whereas Anglicans, we say yes, but also obviously again, our distinctive is Episcopal form of government. We believe it's the laying on of hands
Yep.
through the bishop.
Yep.
So
And I
yeah,
appreciate you making that assertion. Even now when we got into the Anabaptist and Baptist history, I was like, I promised myself I wouldn't do this. I'm not here to argue about anything. I'm here to just
yeah,
ask questions about Anglicanism.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I do appreciate you pointing that out because that is also an important aspect. Like we would agree with apostolic succession in that sense, right? So
Mhm.
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Well, man, yeah, I think this has been super helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to mention before we go.
Yeah,
Uh,
I definitely wanted to just a little. Maybe I can clarify a little bit more better on Anglo Catholicism and Reformed Anglicanism.
sure.
Like I mentioned before, it's definitely a spectrum. Whereas you have Reformed Anglican and you have Anglo Catholicism, there's definitely a high. I mean, there's definitely, you can find people on each end of the spectrum, but you can find people in between. I have met people who claim they're Anglo Catholics, but they don't. They won't pray to saints. They won't venerate images, but they might have a prayer corner in their house or a prayer closet, and they'll have an image, and it helps them when they pray and all that. But they won't venerate it in terms of like what Eastern Orthodoxy does, right? There's that end of the spectrum. There's Reformed people who claim, hey, I'm an Anglican and Reformed Anglican, but I appreciate in terms of what's the word well, yeah, like I mentioned, there's more low church Reformed Anglicans, whereas me, Reformed Anglican, for me, I appreciate vestments. I love high church liturgical incense. Right, I affirm using incense in church services. Right, my church, we use incense, making the sign of the cross, bowing and kneeling in church and worship service, and stuff like that. Obviously, for me, I would obviously don't pray to saints and don't venerate images. If in fact, my church, what my priest explained to me was, well, because obviously the Bible says there's a cloud of witnesses, right? The
Hmm.
saints in heaven obviously are praying for the church on earth, right? They're praying because obviously the church on earth is obviously still here, right? Christ hasn't come returned yet, right? So the saints in heaven are obviously praying for us. All what my priest explained to me, all we literally do is all we'll say is we ask God, Lord, stir the saints up in heaven to pray for us, in this time, whatever you're in, like let's say if I was in the context of in California, right? There's, California is a mess right now with the fires and all that. I would say, hey, Lord, help this time of need, stir up the saints in heaven to pray for us. We're asking God to stir up the saints.
I gotcha.
We're not asking the saints. No, we're asking God, Lord, you know, stir up the saints in heaven to pray for us. And obviously, um, Lord, please let your will be done on earth. That's what we would say. We wouldn't directly. And like I said, I have, in our church we have a big picture of Mary and the baby Jesus. My priest will say it flat out. Mary is simply another saint. Obviously, yes, she's the Blessed Virgin Mary, but we don't pray to her, and she is just another saint. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah,
Yeah, fair enough, man. Actually, one last question. Now I
yeah.
am curious about this. This one I don't know. Do you guys hold to the perpetual virginity of Mary? Uh, or would you say that she had children with Joseph?
So there's my church, like I said, like there's obviously in terms of Anglicanism, there's a mix. Some Anglicans have hold to perpetual virginities. Some Anglicans would say no. Um, my church would obviously there's a lot of people that would do, and I think because I haven't gone and asked people in my
Sure.
church, but
Kind of
I
weird.
believe there might be some that would hold to she wasn't a perpetual virgin. Obviously, the virgin birth obviously is essential. She was a
Right.
virgin when she
Right.
gave birth. But obviously they wouldn't hold to perpetual virginity, and we would say that's fine. That's not a salvific issue. In fact, the former rector, which is about Anglican language, people who don't know, is basically the head presbyter in charge of the church. The former rector, which was the rector of my church for like 10 years, I believe, because of the current rector, the current head priest in my church, I think is going on 3 years, 2 to 3 years, or 4 years, if anything. Anyway, he's actually well known and has a lot of catechism classes online. In fact, there's people from all the way from California down south that I even heard of my former rector. Anyway, he used to be Roman Catholic. In fact, he was going to seminary to be a Roman Catholic priest. But during his time in seminary, he would be obviously reading the Word and looking through church history and all that. He would always bring up these questions and stuff like that to his teacher and like, hey, we as Rome, we say this is necessary, right? Because Rome says, oh, this is necessary for salvation. You have to believe in perpetual Virginia Mary, the Assumption of Mary, a lot of other things added on to even to be saved, right? The papal doctrine to be saved. But he's like, one, um, I don't see that with the early church, and from what the early church, what you see throughout in the early church before the Great Schism, that wasn't the case, right, and it wasn't at the word is it's not in the word, it's not the church never hold to it, and if you see someone holding to perpetual virginity of Mary, you don't seeing someone saying, oh, this is necessary for salvation. Why is
Mm,
this? He would bring up stuff like that,
right.
and his actually professor said, you know what, you're bringing up a lot of questions and all that and a lot of pushback. You're either going to become two things: Anglican or Eastern Orthodox. The way you're going, and obviously he understood Eastern Orthodoxy probably to have their own dogmas in a sense. So he became Anglican, and so he said it in his class. Obviously, he held to the professional, or he's still alive, so he holds to the perpetual Virgin of Mary, but he doesn't make it a salvific issue. He doesn't say if you don't hold to it, you're not saved, right?
Okay.
It's that's what he would, and essentially that would be my church as well.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. No, that's good stuff, man. I'm out of questions, and I think I hear a baby crying. Am I wrong or am I right?
Yeah, I tell my wife if anything goes wrong, just text me. I haven't got a text from her yet, so
Well,
um,
might
yeah,
be time for you to go rescue her. Uh,
yeah. I
so
don't want to leave her too much.
yeah, no, but it was a good conversation, man. And I appreciate your time. Seriously, I know it's hard, and Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate it. And
No,
hey,
I appreciate you, and like I said, I definitely didn't, like for people watching, I don't want to be in terms of controversial and stuff like that. So I didn't want to bring up names, but I hope I was informal and tried to explain myself better. I always say that all the time on my channel. I'm a simple layman. I try to articulate my words better and try to be more very informative to my audience or whoever I'm speaking to. So I hope I was clear. I hope I explained things differently. Well, not differently, properly to where you can understand it.
yeah,
Anglicanism, it is essentially Protestant. Yes, it's Protestant. It's in the Protestant umbrella, right? 39 articles are historically Protestant, right? They're that, and so just for anyone wondering, yeah,
yeah, perfect, man. I appreciate it. It was helpful for me, and yeah, for you guys watching at home, I hope this was helpful to you as well. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you didn't like it, please leave. And if you have found my channel helpful, go ahead and subscribe. I'll also be linking Elias's channel on the description below. So if you want to go check out what he is talking about and the different conversations that are going on in the Anglican world, feel free to give him a visit. Thank you very much, guys. Until next time, God bless. Take care. And we